They say family is everything, but what happens when your family decides you're nothing? I spent my whole life in the shadow of a sister who could do no wrong, while I was always the afterthought, the one who didn't need help, didn't need love, didn't need anything, or so they told themselves. But when my mother died and left everything to Olivia, the house, the money, the legacy, that's when I realized something. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had erased me, and that was their mistake, because now I'm done being silent, and they have no idea what silence has been planning. The old Episcopal church in New Haven stood solemn in the muted light of a grey fall morning. Golden leaves drifted down like ashes outside the stained glass windows, as mourners shuffled into pews clad in black. Mandy Prescott entered alone. Her suit was simple, her makeup non-existent, her hair pulled back. She looked composed. Too composed. Her eyes held a quiet gravity, the kind that suggested not peace, but exhaustion. At the front of the church lay a polished mahogany casket. Inside was Helen Prescott, the mother Mandy had spent a lifetime trying to please. A woman who, even in death, seemed to cast a shadow over everything and everyone. No one greeted Mandy, not her aunt, not her cousins, only sideways glances, stiff nods. She was a guest in her own mother's funeral. Olivia Prescott Winters, as always, took center stage. Her designer dress hugged her figure, blonde curls draped elegantly across her shoulders. She clutched a handkerchief and leaned into her husband, Connor, who whispered softly, "You okay?" Olivia nodded, letting a well-timed tear slip down her cheek. The choir sang, the priest spoke, and then, after the final blessing, came the reading of the will. The family gathered in the adjoining room. Olivia stood surrounded, comforted. Mandy again stood apart. She wasn't invited into the circle, but she didn't try to join. Mr. Holloway, their longtime family lawyer, cleared his throat. The estate of the late Helen and Douglas Prescott, including all real estate bank accounts and investments, has been bequeathed in full to Olivia Prescott Winters. Gasps rippled quietly through the room. Olivia pressed a hand to her chest and whispered, I had no idea. Mandy didn't blink. Mr. Holloway added, almost apologetically. They believed Mandy was self-sufficient and didn't require further support. The room turned colder. Mandy felt the eyes on her, the unspoken words. Of course Olivia deserved it. Of course Mandy would be fine. She always had been. Mandy didn't speak. Her hands tightened slightly at her sides. Her jaw flexed once. She looked at the floor, then back up. No tears, no protest. Just a slow, quiet withdrawal from the room, like someone who had rehearsed grief too many times to make it look convincing. In her mind, her voice was steady. I'm not crying. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because I've been here before. The apartment was quiet when Mandy stepped inside. 4th floor, Brooklyn, small, but hers. A warm amber glow from a reading lamp lit the corner where she set down her coat. She poured herself a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and reached for the old wooden box tucked away on the shelf. Inside, pieces of a life spent in the shadows. A school ribbon, a faded photo, a card signed in her mother's rushed handwriting. She pulled one memory after another from the box, and with them, the weight of years. She saw it clearly again. Olivia's 16th birthday. The driveway packed with relatives and balloons. A brand new car wrapped in a red bow. Their father lifted a champagne flute. Their mother beamed. And then, months later, Mandy's 16th. Her father handed her a second-hand bicycle. You don't really go out much anyway, he'd said. Another memory. Olivia failed her finals in college. Their mother hugged her tightly. You'll always be my princess, she had murmured. Mandy, who had won a scholarship the same year, was told, Good, keep it up. She had. She kept it up. 2 part-time jobs through college, late nights studying, long hours behind the counter at a local cafe while Olivia shopped in Manhattan, flaunting new handbags and curated smiles. Mandy opened her journal and scribbled slowly. I never needed applause. I just needed to not be invisible. The apartment was silent, but not in a peaceful way. It was the silence of someone who had learned to survive without echoes. No voices called her name, no one waiting at the door, but she didn't flinch. She had built her life from the ground up, with no help, no handouts, and no illusions. "My life," she wrote, "is a collage of quiet moments no one clapped for." And yet, somehow, she'd kept going. The colonial home in Greenwich looked just as it had years ago. Trimmed hedges, pristine walkway, a house too perfect to ever feel like home. Mandy hadn't been back since the funeral. But now, under the pretense of picking up a few personal items, she stepped once again into the house that had never really been hers. Olivia greeted her at the door with a strained smile. "Make it quick," she said, stepping aside. "Just try not to make a mess." Mandy walked the halls slowly. She passed the family portraits, the grand staircase, the wall of Olivia's childhood awards. Her own achievements had never made it up there. Drawn by instinct or something more, Mandy turned into her father's old study. The room smelled of leather and dust. She walked to the desk and opened the top drawer. And there it was. A folded document. Thick paper. Real ink. Dated, signed. The original will. The one that clearly stated the estate was to be divided equally between both daughters. Mandy's fingers clenched around it just as Olivia entered the doorway. Her eyes dropped to the paper and narrowed. "You weren't supposed to see that," Olivia said, calm but cold. "They always wanted me to have everything. I just made sure their wishes were clear." Mandy turned to face her. No anger, no shouting, just that icy calm that Olivia had never learned to fear. Until now. "Thank you for your honesty," Mandy said quietly. "That's the first real thing you've ever given me." She folded the will, slipped it into her bag, and walked past her sister without looking back. The rusted oak was the kind of place that felt forgotten. Its wooden floors uneven, the walls stained with years of spilled whiskey and whispered regret. The amber lights hummed softly overhead, casting a nostalgic gloom over the booths. Connor was already there when Mandy arrived, hunched over a half-finished glass of bourbon, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He didn't look up right away. When he finally did, his expression said everything. Confusion, fatigue, and something deeper. Mandy slid into the booth across from him without a word, placing a small folder between them. She didn't ask how he was. She didn't offer pleasantries. There wasn't room for that anymore. "I'm not here for their money," she began, her voice low but resolute. "I never wanted a cent. I just want the truth to see daylight." Connor looked at her, uncertain. Mandy opened the folder, turning it toward him. Inside was a scanned image of the original will, the one their parents had signed before it was quietly replaced. Connor's breath caught. He leaned in, blinking at the paper, then at Mandy. "I didn't know," he murmured. "I figured," she said, pulling out her phone. A few swipes later, she placed it in front of him. Photos of Olivia in Italy, laughing on a yacht, sipping wine at sunset, tangled in the arms of a man who clearly wasn't her husband. David Carlisle. Alongside the photos were comments, old Instagram threads, inside jokes in plain view, proof so obvious it stung. Connor stared at the screen as if it had slapped him. "She said it was a girl's trip," he whispered. Mandy nodded slowly. "She's been lying to all of us, but especially to you." He shook his head, eyes rimmed red, lips pressed tight. For a moment, he looked like a man trying to hold on to the last thread of a story he could no longer believe in. "I know there's still a part of you that wants to see the best in her," Mandy said gently. "But being kind doesn't mean being blind." Connor didn't respond. He just stared down at the phone, the weight of betrayal growing heavier with each second. Mandy leaned back, watching him quietly. In the dim bar light, for the first time, she saw a crack form in Olivia's perfect world. And it started with the man who used to believe in her most. The house looked the same on the outside, elegant white columns and manicured hedges. But inside, it had never felt colder. Connor stood in the center of the living room, the photos still on the mantel, the couch cushions perfectly aligned. Olivia came down the stairs, barefoot, still in her silk robe. "What's going on?" she asked, voice tinged with irritation. Connor didn't answer right away. He held up the printed photos first, the ones from Italy, then the image of the original will. "I want the truth," he said. Olivia's face twisted. "Where did you get these?" she snapped. "She's trying to poison you." "No." His tone was flat. "She didn't lie. You did." Olivia's voice rose to a shriek. She slammed the coffee table, knocking over a vase. "You believe her over me? Your wife?" "I believe what I see." He dropped the documents on the floor at her feet. "And I've seen enough." "I made sacrifices for this family," she screamed. "I gave up everything." Connor's voice didn't waver. "You didn't sacrifice, you manipulated, you stole, you lied." He turned away, walking to the door. "Don't you dare leave," Olivia shouted. "You don't get to just walk out." "I've stayed silent for too long," Connor said without turning back, "and you've used that silence to do whatever the hell you wanted." He opened the door and stepped out. The sound of it closing echoed through the house like a gunshot. Olivia stood frozen, her breath shook. She looked down at the scattered papers, then collapsed onto the floor beside the spilled tea on the table, now cold and forgotten. Elsewhere, Mandy sipped her own tea in a quiet cafe. Her voice echoed softly in her mind. The truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be seen. The internet never forgets, and Mandy knew exactly how to use that to her advantage. She didn't call reporters. She didn't make a scene. She simply gathered the evidence. Screenshots of flirtatious comments, geotags from Italy, timestamps that told their own damning story, and sent them directly to the right places. Group chats buzzed. Mums from the school's PTA opened their phones to find Olivia tangled in an affair. Members of the charity board clicked into a shared drive titled "For Your Awareness." Mandy didn't need a headline. She just needed whispers loud enough to echo. It worked faster than she imagined. By the end of the week, Olivia had been removed from the charity board. Her closest friends stopped replying to her messages. Her social media following began to vanish. The school moms blocked her. The perfect image she had curated for years unraveled in less than 48 hours. One morning, at school drop-off, Olivia stood in her black SUV, wearing oversized sunglasses. She stepped out with a forced smile, but the whispers followed her like shadows. A cluster of parents turned their backs. Another pretended not to see her. Olivia's hand trembled as she reached for her coffee cup, her polished nails suddenly looking brittle. Meanwhile, Mandy sat alone at her apartment window. The light was dusky, grey. She didn't check for reactions. She didn't gloat. She simply opened her journal and wrote. "I didn't tear her down. I just let the truth breathe, and the truth did the rest." She closed the notebook softly, placed it back on the table, and took a deep breath. Outside, the world moved on, and somewhere in the quiet, a woman who had once lived in someone else's shadow had learned that truth, patient, quiet truth, always finds its way to the surface. The courtroom in Fairfield County was cool and sterile, but tension crackled in the air. Reporters lingered near the back pews, whispering, waiting. Mandy sat quietly beside her attorney, hands folded in her lap, eyes locked ahead. She didn't flinch when Olivia walked in, heels clicking against the tile, her expression tight, her usual confidence dulled. The judge, Honorable Wallace, called the hearing to order. Mandy's legal counsel laid out the case, a fraudulent will allegedly altered after the death of Helen and Douglas Prescott. A civil suit, not criminal, for now, but the implications were damning. Connor took the stand first. His voice was even, but the pain in his eyes was fresh. "No, I never saw the original will. Olivia told me everything was being left to her, and I didn't question it. But Mandy found the signed version, the real one." He went on to describe Olivia's controlling behavior, the way she managed every financial detail of their lives, how she'd kept secrets, even from him. Next came Mr. Holloway, their longtime family lawyer. Polished as always, he adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "The version I read to the family was a PDF sent to me via email by Mrs. Winters. I never received or reviewed the original physical copy." Mandy's attorney handed the original to the judge, embossed seal, signatures from both parents, witnessed and notarized. Judge Wallace reviewed the document silently, then looked up. The court finds the physical will valid and binding. Based on the evidence presented, including sworn testimony and the confirmation from legal counsel, it is clear the original intent was for the estate to be divided equally between the two daughters. A beat of silence passed. The gavel fell. The court rules in favor of the plaintiff. Equal inheritance shall be restored. Olivia lowered her head, lips pressed tight. For the first time, she had nothing to say. As reporters shouted questions outside the courthouse, Mandy said nothing. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply tilted her face up to the sky, let the autumn breeze wash over her, and closed her eyes, for the first time in years, breathing freely. The mansion in Greenwich stood still, its pristine facade untouched by the storm, brewing just outside the front gate. A police cruiser idled by the curb. 2 officers stood at the walkway, official documents in hand. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. Olivia stepped outside in a silk robe, barefoot, her hair tangled. She looked nothing like the woman who once commanded every room she entered. She glanced at the officers and the envelope in their hands. "What the hell is this?" she snapped. "Court-ordered transfer of property," one officer replied. "You have until sundown to vacate." A voice rose, shrill, unhinged. "This is my house. I've lived here for 10 years. You can't just take it." From behind the open gate, Mandy appeared, standing on the walkway with quiet, measured calm. In her hand, she held a worn, sky-blue bicycle. Olivia's eyes flicked to it, and for a moment, she froze. "This," Mandy said, stepping forward, "was what they gave me for my 16th birthday. While you got a car, while you got everything." She set the bike gently against the white picket fence. "I'm not taking anything from you, Olivia. I'm just taking back what you stole." Olivia didn't respond. Her lips trembled. Mandy took one more step closer, her voice softened. "Not cruel, just final. I guess now you'll have to learn to be independent." She turned and walked away as the officers followed protocol. Olivia stood there, gripping the handlebars of the bicycle, like it might somehow hold her together. The mansion door shut behind her. The gate swung closed. And the silence that followed was not peace, but consequence. The mansion was quiet in a way that felt eerie, not serene. Mandy wandered its halls, her footsteps muffled by the same carpets she used to tiptoe across as a child. The air was stale with memory. Every room seemed preserved, but none of them felt like home. She passed the dining room, where echoes of family dinners used to ring out. Olivia praised, celebrated, lifted high. Mandy, often forgotten mid-sentence. In the hallway upstairs, she opened the door to her childhood bedroom. The bed still made, dusty shelves holding relics of a life she had long since outgrown. A cracked photo frame, her old scholarship acceptance letter still pinned to the corkboard, yellowed with time. She didn't cry. She didn't linger. Back in the study, she sat at the desk once belonging to her father. She opened her laptop, typed a short email to a real estate agent. Subject line, listing inquiry. Message, please place the property at market value, reason for sale no longer needed. That evening, Aunt Marlene arrived with a warm casserole and 2 glasses. They sat on the patio, the sunset stretching across the treetops. It was the first meal Mandy had eaten in that house that didn't feel like performance. "You know," Marlene said gently, "they didn't choose you because they knew you didn't need them. That scared them more than anything." Mandy said nothing. She just reached for the wine bottle, poured a quiet glass, and raised it slightly. Aunt Marlene smiled and clinked her own glass in return. It wasn't celebration, it was recognition. The end of something heavy, and the quiet beginning of something lighter. The air in Portland smelled different. Fresher, quieter, like the kind of place where people exhaled slower. In a tree-lined neighborhood just outside the city, nestled between a public library and a row of coffee shops, sat a modest community center with big windows and hand-painted signs. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough for Mandy. Inside, the space buzzed gently with the low hum of conversation. Mandy stood at the front of a small classroom, scribbling Financial Independence 101 on a whiteboard. Her students, women of all ages, most of them recently divorced or starting over, watched her with a kind of quiet hope that Mandy recognized all too well. Not long ago, she'd been one of them. Her hair was shorter now, cropped above the shoulders, and she wore jeans and a soft blue sweater. There was nothing flashy about her, but something had changed. There was light in her eyes again. She laughed freely, she listened deeply, and when she spoke about rebuilding, it wasn't theory, it was truth carved from lived experience. During a short break, she stepped outside with a cup of tea and checked her phone. A message from a mutual acquaintance popped up in her inbox. The subject line was simple. Olivia. She hesitated, then opened it. Olivia was now renting a tiny apartment in Yonkers, working temp jobs as a junior bookkeeper. No husband, no friends. Her social ties had unraveled. The fall from grace had been slow but complete. And yet, she was still standing. Mandy sat on the bench outside the center and pulled her journal from her bag. She flipped to the last page and wrote, "I don't feel happy, I don't feel vengeful, I just feel lighter." She closed the journal and leaned back, letting the sun warm her face. It wasn't triumph she felt, it wasn't justice or closure, it was something quieter, deeper. It was peace. Later that day, Mandy packed up a box of books, waved goodbye to her colleagues, and walked toward her old car. She placed the box in the back seat, started the engine, and rolled down the window. The sun hung low, golden and soft, pouring through the trees like honey. As she pulled away, she smiled. Not for anyone else, not for an audience, just for herself, for the woman she had become, for the weight she no longer carried, for the life ahead. Hers, fully hers. And she didn't look back. Sometimes the quietest battles are the ones that change us the most. Not all victories are loud, and not all justice comes in the form we expect. But there's power in rising from the ashes with grace, choosing peace over revenge, truth over silence, and freedom over validation. In the end, healing isn't about proving your worth to others, it's about finally believing it yourself. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more stories that speak to the heart.